Well, what a wonderful opportunity I have this evening to have a conversation with Scott Schwenk, and we're going to be exploring pathways to awakening. To begin with, Scott, thank you so much for making the time to speak with me and to share your experiences and knowledge. I'm sure that it will benefit many people within the Theosophical Society. So on behalf of the Society, thank you for being present.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here with you, John.
Excellent. Well, to begin with, I know that you spent several years living and studying in a Hindu monastery where you encountered the Tantric tradition. Can you tell us something about that experience and how it shaped your own spiritual quest?
Absolutely. So I first encountered that lineage when I was 22. And what had actually sparked my seeking of the lineage was after years of, and I don't know why, resisting people pushing me to read autobiography of a yogi. The winter of my senior year in university, I did, and started having some very strong experiences, particularly in the liminal place between waking and sleep, just as I was falling asleep. In fact, the initiatory mantra of the lineage that I studied with began to spontaneously repeat itself that winter, and I hadn't yet been introduced to it. And so that summer, I find myself visiting this monastery, this ashram, for the first time. It was profound for me to walk onto the property. Ostensibly, like outwardly, they're just three old Catskill resort hotels that have been repurposed. And anybody who's been through that region, you kind of have a sense of what that looks like, or if you ever saw the old movie Dirty Dancing, that was that place. And yet the feeling in the air was so thick that just I could feel it with my hand. It was like no other place I had been in my life so far. And I felt so at home in such an energy-rich place that really just kept drawing me inward. There were a number of things that were unfamiliar, like, I grew up white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Encountering photographs prominently placed all over the place of the teachers, the gurus of the lineage, was confronting for me. And yet this energy that was, it felt like it was literally massaging my heart open. Just being on the property, just showing up. And I took this meditation intensive, this program designed to really catalyze the beginning of the inner work in a serious way, an initiatory experience. And my experience, my strongest experience, my notable experience didn't happen until, it was a 2-day intensive. It was until Sunday before lunch, before the lunch break. And the first day, oh my goodness, I'm 22, I'm trying to fit in, and I'm sitting on the floor with no cushion. My knees within 30 minutes are in so much pain, and so is my back, and I'm just grueling my way through this. And this Saturday, I talked to one of the swamis, one of the monks, and he said, Scott, there's no more and no less enlightenment in a chair than there is on the floor. Take care of your body and sit in a chair. And I was like, sure that I was going to lose something by sitting in a chair. And finally, the pain got the better of me, and I was like, fine. The next day I sat in a chair, and that extra support and relaxation gave the space that literally it was like the lights turned on and they never turned off since. When I would sit for meditation, and I had been meditating for, 6 or 8 years prior in different ways, it was haphazard if anything was going to happen. I never knew. I would do my best to sit down. After that meditation right before lunch in the intensive, the lights came on. I felt like I'd actually become more alive. And ever after, when I would close my eyes, there was a dynamic presence that was more or less palpable forever, and that I learned to build a relationship to, and later began to realize was the very same presence I could feel with my hand walking across the property, and is essentially the creative power of life itself. That goes by so many names and doesn't need a name, whether it's called Shakti or Kundalini or Ruach or Kun, depending on the language and the culture. There's something that can become anything. And it grabbed me, and it hasn't let me go. And my curiosity just goes deeper and deeper day by day.
Can you just say a little bit about what that, I mean, you were talking about your meditation before that experience, and then that experience was obviously very unique and formative, and your meditation afterward was, one can say, radically different. What was it, that experience?
I'm looking to describe it in a way that's not words that I'm already familiar with. You see, in the tradition that I grew up into, this yogic tradition, it's called Shaktipat. And it literally means the descent of grace that awakens an aspect of this fundamental life force that is dormant. It's said that there's two aspects to it. One that powers the heart beating and the breathing and eyes blinking and digestion and basic life force through the body. The other portion of it is in slumber, coiled 3.5 times around within each particle that makes up the atoms and molecules and cells. So this, if there's sufficient force, whether that's within a mantra or a teacher who is sufficiently cooked in this force, or in this case, a lineage or a place where much practice has been done, then that force making contact with one's own awareness can catalyze, jumpstart it to foreground. And this force is the self with a capital S. And it has two main aspects in my experience and in my study. One is simply vast emptiness prior to form, that is aware, that is able to compassionately witness all of existence. And when one looks back at that, it's just this vast spaciousness and emptiness, unconstructed. And then looking forward, it also can become and has become forms and words and the luminosity, the fullness. And they're both part of one suchness. They're not actually separate. So this force foregrounded, I like to say foregrounded. I don't like to say, showed up, because it's already here and everywhere, but it foregrounded in my experience sufficiently enough that I could put attention on it. And the more I put attention on it without trying to make something happen, the more it seemed to unfold within my system and within my psyche. And still is. Clearing out false ideas, false programmings, limited beliefs like I am just this person, just this gender, just this age, good enough for those things, not good enough for those things. I fit with those people, I don't. To burn up all those false notions so that creative power can just spontaneously be in whatever moment's happening without limitation. And on a basic level, on a personality level, on a psychological level, it began to heal my self-esteem issues. When I began to realize and see, oh, I'm not my thoughts, I have thoughts. I'm not my history, I have a remembrance of a history, and it matters and it's real while it exists, but it's not all that I am, and it doesn't need to be where I get my sense of self from.
Well, that is really obviously a very powerful experience and a powerful state to be living. Can I then just follow on by asking, when and what called you into being a teacher or starting to teach, that you felt comfortable, you wanted to share this?
That actually started long before I met the ashram and the teachings of the East. It started as a kid who, and I didn't understand this at the time, it was more retrospect, because I thought everybody could hear thoughts. I thought everybody could feel what other people were experiencing emotionally or physically. And I began to realize as I started to ask questions that my experience was different than the people around me, which led me to seek. When I was little, my parents nicknamed me Curious George. I was super curious about everything. Why? How? Why? How? Show me. I want to. And it just extended itself. And I had a mother who forged a career as a corporate trainer and executive coach. So when I moved, I was away from her for a full year in South Carolina. She was in upstate New York. When I moved back in with her, I started at a new school district. And she handed me a copy of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People to set me up right. And I read it because I was really nervous and I wanted to fit in, and things I'll never forget, like smile. A person's first name is their nearest and dearest possession. Use it often in conversation. Learn people's names. And more things, like just basic things that help me to move past some of my insecurities and get connected to people. So some of what really has driven me to want to facilitate and help other people was really the same things that drove me to want to have a better life for myself and then want that for other people. And in the beginning, as a kid, when I was doing work with people when I was in high school, based on books I had read. I don't recommend that, by the way. I was taking kids through past life regressions, and they definitely went into real seeming scenarios with great details that they had never read about in books. What was that? I don't really know for sure, but I know that I was doing it. And again, I don't recommend doing that from a book. Get properly trained. At that time, because I didn't have a strong sense of self, I was using these gifts and teachings to build relationship cachet and make myself necessary or wanted. And it took many years of inner work to get to the place where I could see that I was getting in the way as a facilitator when it was about my developmental needs or my personality needs to be liked or wanted. That was actually problematic in facilitating people. And so that forced me to go deeper. The original experience I described in the ashram in that meditation intensive, it was very powerful, but it wasn't yet a stage I lived from. It was a state I would visit in deep practice, but it wasn't stable. So the instability also pushed me to want to stabilize it. Like, how do I stabilize this? How do I learn to live like this? Like, in fact, at times, and I know you know what I mean as a person who's been practicing you for so many decades, the bipolarity of going between an insecure personality structure and an exalted state was like withering at best. So how to stabilize it, and who can I talk to that actually has some stability? They're not just saying the words. So a lot of that boils down to me wanting to grow and me caring about other people who want to grow and seeing them as not different and feeling compassion and empathy.
The very best reasons for being a teacher, I think. Well, I know that in your teachings, you move through the core principles that you've termed waking up, growing up, cleaning up, and showing up. If it's all right with you, Scott, I would like to explore what you mean by each one of these stages and what is involved in the process. It will, I think, be beneficial for the listeners this evening. So let us begin by, what does it mean to wake up, and what are we waking up to?
So first of all, I want to give credit where credit is due to these four terms coming from the work of Ken Wilber and integral theory, which stands on the shoulders of the incredible work of Sri Aurobindo, who really was such an advanced soul and brilliant scholar and articulator in granular detail. He had such a big box of words, just like Ken. And the developmental psychologists also weaved into there. So integral theory is a way to look at any given moment in more useful ways. You know, in this moment, you listening to me, you're having an interior experience. Some of that interior experience is how your body feels from what you've eaten in your last meal, how hydrated you are, how rested you may feel, whether you did your meditation practice or not yet today. Please don't feel guilty if you haven't. There's still more day if you're awake. And 5 minutes is a good start. But you have your interior experience. And how you perceive me right now in your interior experience is very much based on the different intelligences and how developed they are. Doesn't mean you're not smart. That's intellectual intelligence. That's just one. There's emotional intelligence. Many of you listening now know about that from Daniel Goleman's work from the last number of decades. You know, our ability to self-soothe the nervous system at will. Where is that at? And our ability to sense what we are experiencing emotionally and to refer to it rather than be stuck in it. Well, all of those interior experiences are subjective. There's also a way to look at what's happening with you if we had you hooked up to an EEG, maybe a heart monitor, maybe in an MRI right now, fMRI, and we'd see measurable data about brain waves, heart rate variability, and other markers. So what this work of integral theory has done is shown us that science and spirituality are not two separate phenomenon. They're two different views on one thing. So waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up are not separate siloed endeavors necessarily, but they're ways of looking at our whole being more closely enough for something really holistic to develop, as opposed to lopsided. One of the great critiques of the first two vehicles of Buddhism is that they get lost in emptiness and they stop there, that there's no self. That's the end of the story. It's a long argument between the Tantrikas and the Buddhists. Although when you get into Tantra, there's a lot of crossover because the same region of the world, Tantric Buddhism and Tantric Shaivism. Waking up is recognizing that there's one something that is manifesting right now as you, as me, as the computer, as the trees growing outside the window, as the wind blowing through the leaves, this one something. One of the foundational scriptures of this one lineage of Tantra called Kashmir Shaivism, you don't need to remember that. It's 20 lines, 20 pithy descriptions that point out and literally transmit our ability to recognize the nature of reality itself, the nature of the creative power that is manifesting as everything. It's called the Pratyabhijna Hridayam. It's the doctrine of the heart of self-recognition, the doctrine about recognizing the self with a capital S, which transcends and includes our individuality. And the first two sutras really are the most important. Sutra 1, Chittihi Swatantra Vishvasati Hetuhu. Sutra 2, Swachaya Swabito Vishvam Unmilyati. One consciousness, Chitti, is expressing as all forms. And it's like a play. Back then they didn't have movies, but now I would talk about it like a movie. It's like a play. And so this energy is referred to in the tradition as she. So it kind of turns the last couple thousand years on its ear of a feminine Godhead, a feminine principle that manifests all of existence. That she is the story of the play, the actors in the play, the audience watching the play, and the stage on which it's all arising. And she and you are not two separate things. She and you and I are one. This understanding is what we begin the practice with wherever we're at in the journey. But this understanding is what wakes up. This is the waking up. The actual recognizing, not just thinking it. It's one thing to think, oh, I and the power of creation are one. That's a thought. But how is it influencing my body, my interactions, my choices? Or am I still being influenced by my conditioned history? How I feel about my bank balance, how many friends invited me to their birthday party this year, and so on. So that's more in the waking up. And that can happen at any stage of growing up. And whatever stage of my growing up, this is getting into more developmental psychology, that's how I will make meaning of the awakening. So if I'm a fundamentalist in my growing up, I will believe in my awakening that some great cosmic dictator in the sky bestowed this seeing on me. So there's an I and this separate kind of dictator God in the sky. And if I'm a fundamentalist, I need to believe what my chosen group believes for survival. It's literally fight or flight. And violence is still considered okay if I'm a fundamentalist, because if you're not one of us, you're one of them. So you could be a fundamentalist vegan. I've met people who get very evangelical, nearly violent, if not actually violent, truly. You could be a fundamentalist anything. It doesn't have to be about religion. There's an us and a them. When you start moving into developing into what we call pluralism, you actually experience at this stage of growing up, there are many paths to awakening. And all of them are valid. If they're helping people to grow and they're not doing harm, they're all valid. They're different entry points. Then you skip a bunch of stages ahead to something called construct aware. This is the beginning of living more consciously aware of awareness itself. And this is where it becomes naturally obvious in a conversation that if we talk about church or mosque or temple, that those are constructed ideas, that money is a constructed idea. There was a time before there was money. There was a time before there was Christianity. There was a time before there was Islam. There was a time before there was a Theosophical movement. Anything in words is constructed and thereby limited, and not the actuality it's pointing to. The Taoists have a saying that words are like fingers pointing at the moon. Look at the moon, don't get lost in the words. Well, the construct-aware person actually sees this arising when they're thinking about something, and it's informing how we're making choices. So growing up involves emotional intelligence, becoming more fluid in relational intelligence. You know, some of us have met people who are well-branded teachers out in the world who still have a very rugged ego structure, a very individualist ego structure. They're not yet, their state isn't holding up in their private, intimate relationships in a flourishing way, in a nourishing way for everybody concerned yet. So that's a growing up opportunity. So in growing up, we might work with the growing up stuff with a somatically based psychologist or psychotherapist. We're not necessarily going to depend on the Eastern guru sitting on the high throne on the Gadi for everything. Whereas originally, you know, going back, say, in the 600s AD, if you were in the East and you had a guru, you went to the guru for everything. But it didn't mean that the guru was good at everything. That was just part of the construct or the mythology. They were capable, hopefully, of transmitting high states of consciousness, waking up, but not necessarily of the growing up stuff. So psychology really became the gift of the West in a certain regard. And these granular interior awarenesses, especially from the Tantric Buddhists, became the province of the East. And so here we've got this conversation of things coming together. And when they come together, we can have a more whole picture and a more holistic development. So we're not just like getting high at the temple on the meditation and coming home and, basically burning our spouse to the ground for not bringing home our favorite form of cheese. Like, well, where did your great state go from the temple? Like, why are you talking to me this way? If everything is God in costume, then why are you treating me like the gum on the bottom of your shoe? It's a growing up opportunity. So cleaning up can sound similar to growing up. Cleaning up is really illuminating the unconscious, the storehouse, the basement where things have gotten shoved. You want to know what's in your unconscious. See how you respond when you get triggered. Somebody says something really intense and you get triggered. Trauma is stored in the unconscious until it becomes conscious. So when trauma is triggered, we can find ourselves going into freeze mode. I've recently discovered that a lot of my life moments growing up, I was in freeze and didn't know it, but as kind of a robust guy, I would just maneuver on top of it and not know it, while having a low grade or medium grade discomfort in my stomach, had a lot of digestive issues and insecurities that weren't getting dealt with. So that's illuminating the unconscious, cleaning up. Showing up, you've got provisional access to wakefulness, or to the field we all are birthed from. It's great intelligence. How much are you letting it be in the driver's seat in ordinary moments? Or am I? That's showing up. Where are you showing up from? So that's a kind of a deep dive, but a lighter touch on waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up.
That is very interesting. And obviously, it is a holistic process. It sounds really, it's not like you just start there and do that bit, and then you'll get to this bit. They're interrelated and support each other from what I'm understanding.
Yeah.
Would you say that experience that you talked about earlier, before lunch, the meditation before lunch, was that your kind of really clear moment of waking up?
One of them. And that was one of the illusions that's been dispelled over the decades of practicing deeply, is that awakening is not a one-time event. There are people like Ramana Maharshi or Eckhart Tolle who've had a really enormous movement into the waking up place. But it was so intense that they couldn't metabolize it through their body and nervous system and personality structure. So in both cases, they were basically dumb and mute for a couple of years until somebody came and helped him out. Tolle was sitting on a park bench drooling on himself. I don't know how many of you want to sign up for that. And Maharshi was laying on a temple floor and bugs were crawling all over him. He wasn't even eating until some people found him and helped him. Apparently, when Eckhart Tolle and his wife Kim, who's also a co-teacher in that work with him, were speaking at a summit series in Los Angeles a couple of years ago before quarantine, and I don't know if it was a question from the audience or something she just spontaneously spoke about, but she said, at least at the time, to my recollection, that Tolle wasn't really good around the house. He was really good at being high on consciousness, but not in terms of doing the dishes or cleaning up after himself. So this is where we start to see the difference between waking up and growing up. It's not enough in this world to just wake up and expect everybody else is going to suddenly take care of all of our physical needs, clean our house for us, take out the trash. Somebody's got to take the trash out. And so what I'm going to suggest, and I'm not doing this on my own, I'm standing on the shoulders of other people who've said such things. Waking up is one part of that journey of the waking up. Waking back down is the hard work. Waking up's not terribly hard. It can happen suddenly. But waking down, learning to apply that and actually come from that view, especially in the circumstances that the ego structure doesn't like, or with people one feels uncomfortable around. Are we getting caught once again in the constructs? Are we getting caught once again in our prior conditioning and dividing up reality and then suffering? I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that. If it's all made of one substance, then my work is to keep walking the path until that's integrated. And it doesn't mean I'm going to let somebody keep slapping my face because they're also the one in costume. There needs to be discernment. Viveka, discernment in Sanskrit.
Can I just ask, do you think it's necessary to go through an initiation of some sort in order to get to the waking up state at any time?
Whether that happens in an obvious way or a very subtle way. I've had female clients, one I'm thinking of in particular, who had a profound awakening giving birth to her first child. The absolute release she had to go through to give vaginal birth to a child and go through that ordeal, the letting go she had to encounter. In the letting go, this force woke itself up and completely changed her existence. And then she later found a tradition and had further awakenings. So there does need to be some catalytic something, but that can happen in a dream. One can be initiated in a dream. There are plenty of stories of great saints who were initiated by a great being in a dream. If you have the great good fortune of meeting somebody who's got they're cooked enough, then simply being in their presence might be enough, or hearing their words. There's 4 typical ways this initiation is given: through look, word, touch, or will. So it can happen through looking at a photograph even. For some people have had an awakening looking at a photograph of Ananda Mahima or Paramahansa Yogananda or Ramakrishna, any of these beings. It's still available. The energy signature is still available. So, but yes, I do feel like there needs to be an initiation, but it's not a one-time thing. And that one ends up discovering as the path unfolds, if it goes well, that one has access to that which initiates within one's own consciousness. Always. And that's where it was already happening. It seemed to maybe come from another place to this place. But if we really accept the non-duality of reality, whether that's through the lens of Hermetic alchemy, as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without, or how one of the tantras, the Vishvasara Tantra, says, what is here is there, what is not here is nowhere. What is here is there, what is not here is nowhere. So whatever realization Ramana had, or Eckhart had, or Ramakrishna had, or the Buddha even had, or all the Buddhas, female and male, and intersex, because they run the gamut. That realization is available right where you are sitting right now listening to this program. That energy is available in every particle in existence, or it doesn't exist at all. And there's a way in which, when you're ready, if the way you hear that can open the receptivity to that flow. And it's this work, this work of transforming one's own psyche from bound and stuck into coming from freedom and spontaneity, boils down to contact, alignment, and flow. Making contact internally with this chosen energy, whatever that, love, compassion, make contact, then align, which can include posture, it can include how I'm breathing, dropping into the space between thoughts. These are all forms of alignment. And then letting the energy flow. I don't make it flow. I don't make the river flow. I don't make the ocean do its thing. It does its thing. It's its nature. It's Grace's nature to unfold within us when we're receptive and have created the conditions for it to.
So is that what you've just, the synopsis of what you've just said, would you say that is what you mean by walking the path?
Yeah, I would say that walking the path as a person practicing Tantra means using everything that arises in the day to grow. So something that doesn't go the way I would like it to go. How am I taking perspective on that? How can I bring my experience, my practice to this moment? Or am I just going to suffer and then maybe call a few friends and tell them and get them to suffer about it? And also, this is something I like to highlight a lot. As a recovering overthinker, the path is not information gathering. Reading books is not going to wake you up. It's also not going to wake you up, because a phrase, a line could just shift perspective in a moment. But it's not about gathering information, because that's the ordinary mind just basically entertaining itself. So where's the real practice? Well, the real practice is when you turn the program off and we're done today, and you're standing on your phone talking to the cell phone carrier's customer service, and you've been on hold for 30 minutes, and they end up just reading a script and not helping you with your question at all. Are you going to burn the house down? Are you going to make this person feel small and insignificant, who's probably just trying to keep a job to feed their family and doing the best they can with what they have, but it's not good enough for you? So how are you, we going to meet that moment? Well, that's a moment to see how our practice is really going. Yeah, I used to believe that if I was having, quote, good meditation, that meant I was supposed to have visions and have floods of energy running through my body and practically levitate. And I had the gift of a great teacher who's still mentoring me 28 years later, Sally Kempton, who said, the test of good meditation is not what happens while you're sitting, it's how it impacts you once you've gotten up from your seat. Any of you who meditate enough, you know you've had meditations. I've had meditations that might have been boring, or it seemed like nothing happened, or where we were just so agitated going to the cushion or on the cushion, stuff was coming up, and it was all we could do to stay and breathe. But once we stood up from the meditation, there was this stillness and this silence, and contentment had foregrounded once again. So that's where to look. How is it impacting my life? And if you're still doing your single syllable TM mantra that you got 30 years ago and having lovely experience, but you're nasty to your spouse, it's time to reinvestigate how your practice is going and how you might maybe bring something else in.
Yes, that does remind me of some of the approach and teachings that my own teacher shared with all his disciples. That any difficulty that arose was a teacher coming to teach you, which resonates with what you've just said. That what we experience is an opportunity to learn, and therefore growing up. So we can be always growing up. Would you say that?
I would, and I've heard it said more in the tantric world. So tantra is a little bit more fearless than some other practices, willing to confront intensities. And so in tantra, you often can see depictions of deities, like in Tibetan tantra and in Hindu tantra, there can be scary looking images, like the image of Kali wearing a necklace of ripped off heads, dripping blood and fangs, or Mahakala in the Tibetan tradition, these Ugra, these ferocious deities. Well, what these are is aspects of our own consciousness that are strong enough to digest and metabolize the places where we're still being an asshole, forgive my French, and meet that. So some teachers that I've encountered, and this is my experience now, is like, if you're not having difficulties, your practice probably isn't strong enough. Your practice probably isn't strong enough yet. And I don't mean you're not strong enough for a practice. The practice isn't intense enough yet. If it's not bringing up shadow to metabolize in some places, if it's not revealing where I am still problematic in how I relate to people when I'm not getting my way, for example, then I probably need to intensify my practice and let it bring something up. Now, if you're just new, please don't get scared. Just learning to relax the body and use the breath to change your inner state, that's a lot, and that's beautiful, and it's wonderful. And it doesn't mean also that you need to make a hobby out of looking for suffering, more suffering. More suffering doesn't mean more enlightenment. So a lot of these things can sound paradoxical until we're listening from a more relaxed state. Mm-hmm. And take what's relevant for now, and don't try and take everything. There, in any of these lineages, in John's lineage, in my lineage, other lineages, there's so many teachings because there's so many different temperaments of people. And this is why it can be very beneficial when you reach a certain place to have a living human who's further down the road than you are to check in about how your practice is going and how to adjust it at certain different changes or seasons of life. That can be very, very helpful, especially if they're not trying to make you worship them, their human persona.
Yes. I wonder whether you think that in following the path, and you just mentioned about confronting the difficult situations and the challenges, that is a possible opportunity for growth. But do you think that willpower, is that a requirement, or is it helpful? Because I know in the West there is this tendency to rely quite a lot on willpower and feeling that somehow is a strength. But my observation is sometimes that willpower is counterproductive in some of these spiritual practices.
And that's stage dependent. So I feel like for a long time, it's actually okay that ordinary willpower, if that's what gets somebody to show up for their practice, that's necessary, because otherwise they might just not do it. So in the beginning, some of our neuroses actually are helpful to getting us to the cushion, the proverbial cushion, because we just don't want to suffer. Suffering, it becomes like a temple bell. Oh, I want to practice. I don't want to suffer. I want to practice. I'm going to will myself to practice. I'm going to will myself to practice longer. Instead of one round around the rosary or mala of my mantra, I'm going to do 3 and see what happens. I'm going to will myself through it, even when I start to get hungry or bored. Over time, and I know you know this, John, a subtler form of will starts to become noticeable that's not grasping, clinging, and chasing. So the first type of will we're talking about is like grasping, clinging, or chasing. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to show up. I. With enough practice and enough time in the fire of practice, some of the rugged ego structure starts to burn off enough to recognize there's a subtle energy of will that we could call grace, that has more intelligence than my own historical mind, and that as I learn to recognize this subtle force of will and partner with it, it will lead me in all good ways, including in how to adjust my practice. But the ordinary mind has to quiet down enough to notice this subtle will. It's like some of us have been in locations where there's security doors to get into a building, like in Los Angeles where I live, bank doors. Many banks had doors like this. So there was an outer set of doors that you go into a small chamber, antechamber, and the inner door to the bank won't open until the outer door to the outside has fully closed and sealed. The magnet wouldn't let the inner door open. Spiritual practice is often like this. The inner door doesn't open until the outer door is closed. What do I mean in a practical way? So let's say your mantra is Om Namah Shivaya, let's just say, and you've been given it in an empowered fashion in a formal way, and you're repeating Om Namah Shivaya. At a time when you're feeling distressed, a contract you are waiting for appears to be falling apart, and you're not sure what to do. So you decide to sit down and work with your mantra to cohere your mind and get some inner guidance. So I'm sitting here, I'm repeating Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. But I'm simultaneously thinking about the problem. What should I do? Who should I call? Where should I go? What should I read? In that framework, the outer door hasn't closed. So I'm actually enervating and agitating myself. I'm still in problem consciousness more than I'm in solution consciousness. And we have to grow into the ability to trust that if I'm not staring at the thing that seems problematic, doesn't mean it won't get solved. That I can take a pause and just go inside and let my breath soothe my nervous system. I remind myself that the longer my exhales, the more the mind stream will slow down. And so I stay with this instead of checking back in on the problem and rethinking about it. And I stay with this and the mind gets quieter and I begin to notice there's a gap between my thoughts that I can rest in and feel nourished. And as I begin to feel more nourished, my psyche opens and suddenly a solution pops to mind. And the solution may be releasing my attachment to a particular outcome. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm getting calls from all over the world right now about creating new courses and programs online. And yet at this recording, I've got a retreat scheduled for the Omega Institute in June. There are 4 people registered. That's not sufficient to keep the retreat at the moment on their side or mine. Now, you catch me 10 years ago and I'd be messed up about it. I'd be like, oh God, I got to really work hard and fill this retreat. How am I going to look? What are people going to think about me? How I'm working with this is like, all right, I've got a lot going on. I'm not worried about it for the sake of income. I'm interested in it being a fulfilling experience for everyone involved. And if it's not the right time for this to happen, so be it. Something else will come along. I have that trust, but it's taken years of practicing with challenging moments to see that when I touch that real feeling of trust, I'm stepping into the possibility of flow and being guided by something more coherent than my individual ego structure. And it always works out. It's just not maybe what I thought was going to happen.
Well, that is, I think, a very, very practical way to approach the way life unfolds for us with a great uncertainty. And it's strange that you bring that up as an example, because I've just had to cancel a program myself because of low attendance. It must be the season. But I don't know, Scott, but I certainly hope and I trust that it will all be well. Can I just ask that of all the practices that you teach, because you're teaching, as you said, widely and now for quite some time, what is the core of your own practice?
Breath and softening are the bedrock, most important things I do. So checking in with my breath. How I'm breathing is how I'm living. If I don't like how I'm feeling, I check the rhythm and the depth of my breath and adjust it. And then I pair that with physically softening the body. The way I teach that is through what I call the 6 points of softening. And if you're listening and you're not driving, you could do this now. Unless you have a lot of practice meditating, then you could do this while you're driving, but be careful, please, or pull over. So you soften these 6 places in the body and everything softens in between. And they work well as pairs. So imagine opening a fist with your mind, but do this in the soles of your feet without physically having to move your feet. Imagine softening the soles of your feet radically and continuously, like you're opening a fist there with your mind, softening skin, tendons, and connective tissue, and the muscles all the way to the bone. And keep that going and do the same thing with the palms of your hands, wherever they might be in space. No special position is needed. Soles and palms softer and softer and softer. Deep breath and let go slowly, and let your awareness move to softening the 4 corners of your eyes, the inside and the outside corners of the eyes, melting like butter on a hot day. And doing the same thing with the region inside and around your ears. And the final pair, let your tongue come to rest deeply in the floor of your mouth, softening your tongue from end to end as you melt and soften all the little muscles running throughout the pelvic floor, groin region, sphincter, PC muscle, letting go, letting go, letting go. Soles, palms, eyes, ears, tongue, pelvic floor, groin region, letting go, letting go. As the breath comes in deeply and goes out slowly, sweetly. And this is meditation already, or contemplation space, a more spacious experience of mind. The more you practice this, the more you'll carve the neural pathways for this to become easier and easier and easier, including in challenging situations. So what we do when we feel confronted is we tighten. We become an object that a force can hit, and the counterintuitive and the graceful move is to soften. Then more intuition is available. The ability to sense the environment is stronger and wider, and to be able to adjust and have more options.
Well, that in itself is a lovely practice, certainly. You can feel it immediately, actually. I also know that you teach ecstatic breathwork as part of your repertoire. And I know that there are many types of breathwork that people are teaching these days. Can you say a little bit about how you approach it?
Sure. So ecstatic breathwork is a name I've given to something. It was originally a very hidden esoteric tantric technique that a number of traditions use. It can be found in Taoist practice. It can be found in Tantric Buddhist practice. It can be found in other places too. It's a 3-part breath that's done through the mouth. So those of you who are wondering, oh, but isn't it unhealthy to breathe through the mouth? In general, yes, but for shorter periods of time, for a specific purpose, there are breaths through the mouth. They tend to be more evocative and heating to the body, building yogic fire for transformation. So it's 2 breaths in through the mouth, 1 breath out through the mouth. First half of the breath comes into the low belly, second half into the upper chest, and then a full exhale. And that gets into a rhythm, usually done laying down, and often set to evocative music. And then there could be guidance or cueing along the way, depending on what the focus is of that breathwork session. The breath in that way really is like truth serum. It will reveal where pockets of tension are held in the physical or subtle body. And then we are able to bring compassion to these areas. Also, it brings forth a lot of energy, tingling, vibrating, running through the body. And you'll find that wherever you put your attention, energy will go there. I'll prove it to you right now without you doing breath work. So listeners, just put all of your awareness and energy and attention on the bottom of your right foot. Just bring all of your focus, all of your attention, all of your awareness, all of your focus, all of your attention to the bottom of your right foot. Already you're having sensations there. It might be heat or tingling. Now move it to your left ear. All of your awareness, all of your focus, all of your attention to your left ear. Top of your head. Palm of your right hand. So in the more expanded state, energized state of ecstatic breath work, there's more energy noticeable to work with, to direct to certain areas. Many people have said things like, oh my goodness, that was like a decade of talk therapy in one breathwork session. I feel like I've actually released something rather than just tell more stories about it. And also, John, what I love about breath, and there's different ways to do this, not just ecstatic breath work, but organized breathing can be a very quick way into deep meditation because it clears the noise of ordinary mind sooner. So about 20 minutes or so of active 3-part breath, when we shift to a resting breath, which is just as important, if not the most important part of the session, mind often, for the first time, if it's new, drops into deep meditation consciously. And that makes an imprint that can be referred to and remembered and worked from. So you know what you're looking for when you go to sitting meditation.
Excellent. Sounds like a really skillful means and of great benefit physiologically, but also as an aid, as you said, to more easily access states of stillness and silence. We're getting close to the end of our time. I would just, a couple of last questions. One is, what do you think the key to transformation is, if you could put it in a nutshell?
Love. Love. Without love, we can get really nihilistic, especially when emptiness starts to really present and our path is unfolding well and emptiness presents. Without love, we can get stuck in emptiness and not have finished the inner work or gone significantly far enough. So love, and love isn't an emotion the way I'm talking about it. Like compassion isn't personal either. They're forces. Like beauty is a force of the divine. Love is a force that's everywhere. And in the space of love, we have an easier time letting go of what's not for us because we're nourished. So in the force of love, we're nourished. And when we're nourished, we make better choices. When we're feeling devoid of love, we grasp, cling, and chase at temporary things that may seem like nectar, but actually turn out to be poison. Whether that's an unhealthy relationship choice or a vice or a way of engaging with food or sugar. So when we're nourished, we make better choices. And I haven't found a more coherent source of nourishment than love. Which leads me to say over and over again over the years, love is the whole story.
It has been really delightful, uplifting, inspiring in many ways, and insightful for me to have this conversation. I hope that the other people who are listening to it will also derive some benefit, but I'm grateful for the benefit that I've derived from it. And on behalf of the Theosophical Society, once again, thank you so much, Scott. And with great respect for all the work that you are doing and all that you are.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. May we all be happy, may we all be well, and may we all feel loved. And may the fruits of our practices uplift all beings as well as the earth.